What if the house next door held a secret no one saw coming? What if behind suburban walls, a teenager was being held like an animal, starved, beaten, and forgotten for years? In one of the most disturbing child abuse cases in recent history, an 18-year-old girl escaped the unimaginable and revealed a world of horror behind closed doors. This is the story of the Gloucester Township teen who broke free, of the mother who betrayed her, the stepfather who abused her, and the justice system now fighting to repair the damage. What you're about to hear is not fiction. It's a true story of pain, silence, and unimaginable survival. In May 2025, an 18-year-old girl escaped from a home in Gloucester Township, New Jersey, after being confined for years by her own mother and stepfather. She was kept in a dog crate, chained to toilets, starved, and sexually abused. Her escape exposed a terrifying truth no one noticed. This documentary dives deep into her story, verified through official court documents, law enforcement statements, and respected sources. If you believe stories like these need to be told, raw, factual, and without filters, then please subscribe. This is more than content. It's a mission to give voice to the unseen. Hit subscribe. Stay with us. And never look away again. Because some stories change everything. On the evening of May 8, 2025, a teenage girl emerged from the shadows in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. She was barefoot, her head freshly shaved, her wrists visibly scarred. She knocked on the door of a neighbor's house, someone she had never spoken to before, and whispered a desperate plea. "Please help me." What that neighbor didn't know at that moment was that the girl had just escaped years of captivity. Behind her, inside a quiet home on a tree-lined street, was a nightmare that had gone undetected for over half a decade. Her captors were not strangers. They were her own mother, 38-year-old Brenda Spencer, and her stepfather, 41-year-old Branndon Mosley. The neighbor acted quickly, calling 911. The teen was taken into protective custody and immediately examined. Police began an investigation. Within 48 hours, the horrors she described were confirmed. On May 11, 2025, both Spencer and Mosley were arrested. The charges they faced shocked even the most seasoned investigators. In their home, authorities found evidence of prolonged and deliberate captivity. They found a padlocked bathroom door equipped with an alarm to alert if it was opened. The bathroom, described by prosecutors as filthy and barely furnished, had been the teen's prison for months. Before that, she was locked in a large dog crate, literally kept in conditions fit for an animal. She was allowed out only to eat or use a bucket toilet. Neighbors described the girl's appearance when she fled. She definitely had scars on her wrists, one neighbor said. Her head was shaved. She was shaking. This wasn't a moment of temporary abuse or sudden outburst. This was a calculated, systemic form of control and torture that lasted for years. And it had unfolded quietly in the middle of a neighborhood. The victim's descent into captivity began years earlier, in 2018. At the time, she was in middle school. According to prosecutors, her parents pulled her out of public education to homeschool her. But she was never taught. There was no curriculum, no supervision, just isolation. Initially, she was confined to a dog crate in the home. Bound at the hands, she had no privacy, no autonomy, and no way to communicate with the outside world. Her daily life revolved around survival. She was fed inconsistently, forced to perform physical labor, and punished with beatings. She was made to stay silent. As she got older, the conditions worsened. She was later moved to a bathroom that was padlocked from the outside. The door was fitted with a security alarm to alert the adults if she attempted to escape. Inside the room, she had a single bucket to use as a toilet. There were no windows. The bathroom became both her bedroom and her prison. Prosecutors allege that during this period, she was repeatedly sexually assaulted by Branndon Mosley. He would enter the room and coerce her into sexual acts, often using food as leverage. If she wanted to eat, she had to comply. These acts, according to court filings, happened while her mother was in the home. Her wrist showed signs of scarring consistent with being shackled. She was denied basic hygiene. When relatives came to visit, she was hidden. She was not allowed to talk to anyone on the phone or online. To the outside world, she had simply vanished. Despite living in a digital age, no alarms were raised. There were no school attendance follow-ups, no wellness checks, no complaints made. Years passed, and her suffering continued in silence. How could a child vanish from the public eye for years without anyone noticing? It's a question investigators and child advocates have asked repeatedly since the victim's escape. Neighbors say the house on the corner seemed normal, quiet even. No one suspected that anything sinister was happening inside. "I didn't even know they had kids," one neighbor said. "You just never saw anyone come or go." The family had withdrawn both daughters from school under the guise of homeschooling. In New Jersey, homeschooling laws are relatively lenient. Once a family notifies a district of their intent to homeschool, there's no mandatory curriculum check, no testing, and often no follow-up. Prosecutor Grace McCauley called the situation a failure of oversight. "We have to do more to protect homeschool children," she said. The victim's younger sister, 13, was also removed from school and allegedly lived in the home during the abuse. It's unclear if she was subjected to the same treatment, but she has since been placed in protective custody. Inside the house, authorities found dozens of animals, including dogs, chinchillas, and birds, living in unsanitary conditions. The smell of urine was overwhelming. The bathroom where the teen had been locked was described as inhumane. To hide the abuse, Brenda Spencer reportedly shaved her daughter's head as punishment, beat her with belts, and used fear as a weapon. The teen wasn't just physically imprisoned. She was psychologically broken down. When she finally escaped, she didn't scream. She didn't run in panic. She walked quietly and determined to the only place she thought might help, a stranger's door. Following the 911 call and initial reports, law enforcement in Gloucester Township wasted no time. Detectives from the Special Victims Unit, alongside members of the Gloucester Township Police Department and county prosecutors, entered the residence on May 10, 2025, with a search warrant. What they found inside confirmed the unimaginable. The bathroom where the girl had been confined was not a temporary arrangement. It had been intentionally secured with a heavy padlock and outfitted with an alarm that would alert Brenda Spencer or Branndon Mosley if the door was opened without authorization. The air was thick with the stench of unwashed clothes, human waste, and ammonia. Nearby, investigators found shackles and a crate. There was no sign of schooling materials or children's belongings, just a bucket, a thin blanket, and a locked door. By May 11th, Brenda Spencer and Branndon Mosley were arrested without incident. Their mugshots were released the following day. The charges they faced were as severe as they were numerous, reflecting years of calculated abuse. Spencer was charged with first-degree kidnapping, second-degree conspiracy, second-degree aggravated assault, 5 counts of second-degree endangering the welfare of a child, third-degree criminal restraint, third-degree aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, third and fourth-degree unlawful possession of a weapon. Mosley was charged with all of the above, plus 2 counts of first-degree aggravated sexual assault, 2 counts of second-degree sexual assault, 1 count of second-degree endangering the welfare of a child for sexual misconduct. According to Camden County Prosecutor Grace McCauley, the evidence pointed to long-term, intentional acts of psychological control, sexual coercion, and physical confinement.
Mosley was additionally placed on administrative suspension from his job as a SEPTA, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, employee. The arrest affidavit and court statements describe a coordinated pattern of abuse, with Spencer enabling and enforcing the confinement, while Mosley committed sexual assaults over multiple years. Detectives documented statements from the teen, physical evidence at the scene, and medical assessments showing signs of prolonged trauma and malnutrition. At the initial hearing held on May 16, 2025, the court denied bail to both defendants. The judge cited the severity of the crimes, the vulnerability of the victim, and the high flight risk associated with the defendants. Both Spencer and Mosley were remanded to Camden County Jail pending trial. Public reaction was swift and visceral. Local and national news covered the story heavily, and legal analysts pointed out how rare it is for such an extensive pattern of abuse to remain undiscovered in a suburban neighborhood. Prosecutors stated that they intended to pursue the maximum penalty allowable under the law. The state's attorney's office has since announced intentions to bring forward a grand jury indictment. Additional charges may be considered based on new evidence, especially surrounding the younger sibling's experience. As the legal process began to unfold, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary abuse case. It was a sustained campaign of control, deception, and horror, and the law was about to catch up. In the wake of the escape, the voice of the survivor emerged, not through media interviews or press conferences, but through the quiet bravery of disclosure. The 18-year-old girl, whose name remains undisclosed for her protection, gave a full statement to law enforcement just days after her rescue. Her account was harrowing. She had been abused, confined, manipulated, and silenced for most of her adolescence. In her statement, she described feeling like a prisoner in her own home. She recounted the way her stepfather controlled her food, her movement, her voice. Her mother, she said, not only knew what was happening, but actively helped orchestrate the isolation. Spencer shaved her head as punishment and ensured her daughter remained unseen, unheard, and invisible to the world. The physical evidence, bruising, shackling injuries, malnourishment, corroborated nearly every claim. And while she did not speak publicly, her testimony became the foundation of the legal case, guiding detectives, prosecutors, and advocates alike. Beyond the courtrooms and case files, the public response was one of shock, outrage, and heartbreak. Media outlets across the country covered the story, and images of the modest Gloucester Township home became a symbol of hidden trauma. Online, thousands took to social platforms expressing their support for the survivor and demanding justice. Victim advocacy organizations echoed those sentiments. Camden County Prosecutor Grace McCauley held a press conference urging the public not just to condemn the abuse, but to recognize the systemic flaws that allowed it to persist. She pointed directly at the state's homeschooling policies, which require no academic progress checks or wellness visits once a child is withdrawn from public school. This young woman was failed in many ways, McCauley stated, by her guardians, by a system that didn't check in, and by a world that didn't see her suffering. Community members, too, expressed disbelief that such cruelty could occur unnoticed for so long. Several neighbors came forward stating they rarely, if ever, saw the girls outside. "We had no idea," one neighbor said. "It makes you think, how many more kids are hiding in plain sight?" The survivor was placed under the care of social services and continues to receive medical and psychological support. Authorities confirmed that she is safe, being housed in a secure and nurturing environment. Officials have not disclosed where she is now for her safety. Her courage has become a rallying point for change. Petitions have begun circulating in New Jersey, calling for stricter oversight of homeschooling families and mandatory reporting requirements. State lawmakers have hinted at introducing bills aimed at reforming child welfare and education laws in the upcoming legislative session. For the survivor, the road ahead will be long, but it is also filled with possibility. Her escape ended years of torment, but it also shed light on the cracks in a system meant to protect her. In her silence, she spoke volumes. And in her escape, she gave others a reason to look harder, listen more closely, and never assume safety based on silence. In the aftermath of the survivor's escape and the arrest of Brenda Spencer and Branndon Mosley, attention quickly turned to a haunting question. How could this happen for so long without anyone noticing? The answer lies in the gaps of oversight systems meant to protect children, but which, in this case, utterly failed. The abuse endured by the teen wasn't brief, nor was it subtle. It spanned nearly 7 years across multiple developmental stages of her life. She was pulled from public school in 2018 under New Jersey's homeschooling policy. But unlike some states, New Jersey does not mandate regular academic assessments, wellness checks, or in-person contact between homeschooled children and educational authorities. Once the withdrawal is filed, the child effectively disappears from state view. This gap allowed Spencer and Mosley to hide the teen in plain sight. There were no red flags raised by school officials. No mandated reporting. No annual visits. Without checks and balances, the home became a prison, sanctioned by silence. Prosecutor Grace McCauley emphasized the need for urgent reform. In a televised press briefing, she stated, "We need legislation that requires more than just notification. We need visibility. We need accountability." She pointed to similar cases where children were harmed or killed after being withdrawn from schools with no follow-up. State legislators took notice. Within a week of the arrest, several members of the New Jersey General Assembly publicly announced plans to draft new regulations requiring mandatory wellness checks for all homeschooled children, annual academic progress reporting, at least one unannounced visit per year by a child protection officer, automatic review of child welfare history for all homeschooling households. These proposed laws, still in committee as of June 2025, have garnered both support and criticism. Advocacy groups for homeschool rights voiced concerns about overreach, while child welfare organizations called the reforms long overdue. One legislator, Assemblywoman Trina Duarte, said, "We're not trying to interfere with good families. We're trying to protect the invisible ones." Additionally, Camden County initiated an internal review of its own welfare system. Officials admitted that while Spencer's household had no prior open cases, the lack of outreach following school withdrawal was a missed opportunity to intervene. National news outlets picked up the story, fueling debates around homeschooling accountability across the United States. In the weeks that followed, similar cases from Texas, Georgia, and Michigan resurfaced, each involving abuse that went undetected under homeschooling loopholes. Meanwhile, a grassroots coalition called See Every Child began circulating petitions demanding federal protections for all homeschooled children, including standardized safety visits and reporting procedures. As of June 16th, their online petition had received over 300,000 signatures. The case also ignited new scrutiny over mandated reporters, educators, doctors, and neighbors. Despite occasional glimpses into the Spencer Mosley household, no one had filed a report. Camden County's Department of Children and Families acknowledged that communities need better education on how and when to report suspicious behavior, especially in homes that isolate children. Ultimately, the survivor story did more than highlight a single case of abuse. It triggered a reckoning across multiple layers of public policy. And while the wheels of legislation move slowly, the conversation has already shifted from reactive justice to proactive prevention. The legal showdown commenced in Camden County Superior Court before Judge Gwendolyn Blue on May 22, 2025, just days after the defendants were arrested. The state moved to detain both Brenda Spencer, 38, and Branndon Mosley, 41, pending trial, citing the gravity of the allegations and public safety concerns. Judge Blue did not mince words. Describing the charges as barbaric and constituting acts of torture, she agreed with the prosecution that both Spencer and Mosley posed a high flight risk and should remain behind bars. Deputy First Assistant Prosecutor Kelly Testa provided chilling testimony. According to evidence and the victim's own statement, Mosley admitted in police interviews to locking the girl in a dog crate with her hands cuffed, confining her in a padlocked bathroom chained to the toilet, and keeping her in a bare room with only a bucket to use as a toilet. He also allegedly said he couldn't recall sexual abuse due to alcohol use, but acknowledged it was possible. Judge Blue was visibly appalled. "I find that conduct to be inhumane," she remarked. Their detention was unopposed. Bail was denied. Camden County Court released both Spencer and Mosley to remain in custody at the jail awaiting trial. They will next appear in court on July 23, 2025. Authorities, including Gloucester Township Police Chief David Harkins, talked about the emotional effect of the hearing. "What we heard today, it's just unfathomable to me." Prosecutor Grace McCauley emphasized how this was more than a typical abuse case. It was a form of domestic torture. Mosley's attorney, Megan Helfrich, argued that her client's statements were unreliable, claiming he had been awake for days working overnight shifts when he made them. She disputed the existence of chains and the abuse allegations, stating, "I wholeheartedly believe they were untrue." She also noted that no actual chains were found in the home. While Spencer has not commented publicly, court records show she denies both facilitating the confinement and having knowledge of specific abuse. She maintains that the homeschooling was legitimate, lasting a week, and that any punitive confinement was due to alleged food theft. Both remain in pretrial detention, facing a comprehensive slate of charges, including kidnapping, aggravated assault, child endangerment, criminal restraint, weapons offenses, and, for Mosley, multiple counts of sexual assault. The next hearing, scheduled for July 23, 2025, will likely address motions from both sides and possibly set a trial date. The handwritten notes, photos of injuries, recorded confessions, and vivid neighbor statements paint a vivid case of prolonged, premeditated abuse. Keeping the defendants jailed sends a strong message of protection and zero tolerance. Prosecutors describe the case as unfathomable, highlighting how horrific home-based abuse can go unnoticed. What happened inside that Gloucester Township home was more than a crime. It was a failure of trust, of oversight, and of community. A teenage girl lived in captivity for years, unseen, unheard, and nearly erased from the world. And while justice is beginning to unfold inside a courtroom, the moral questions left behind linger. How many more children are hidden in plain sight? How many signs do we ignore because we don't want to assume the worst? This story forces us to ask, what is our responsibility as neighbors, educators, leaders, and human beings? At its heart, this case is a call to vigilance. It challenges our assumptions that abuse looks obvious, that victims will always cry out, that someone else will notice. It proves that cruelty can hide behind locked doors and smiling faces. And it reveals the devastating cost of silence. But there's also hope. In her act of escape, the survivor reclaimed her voice. In the court's response, we see the beginning of accountability. In public outrage and growing calls for reform, there is momentum for change. The moral of this story is simple, but urgent. No one should be invisible. No child should be forgotten. We must pay attention. We must speak up. And we must never again let bureaucracy or discomfort outweigh the safety of a child. This story isn't just a documentary. It's a reckoning. And if it moved you, if it shook something inside you, don't let it end here. Don't just walk away. Subscribe to this channel. Because these are the stories we tell. The stories that must be told. The stories that demand we listen. Every time you subscribe, every time you share, you help bring the unseen into the light. You help ensure that silence never wins again.